Oh my gosh, man. And then only three. They miss you at the reunion. They miss you at the reunion. It was actually super fun. But it was actually hilarious. You know, it was like, oh my God, lunchtime graduation. And there was well, you don't know. You're right. I had no idea. And it was like, oh, whoops. So what you think? We got 30 seconds. Wait a minute. March is yes. Yeah. Well, that's good. At least there's no more. Yeah. Totally. There's like,
She's ready.
Congrats. Okay.
Figured that out. Like Powers and deductive reasoning was fully engaged.
Well, I can feel no one was getting it. See here over the edge? It was for right over here. Girls, you ready? All right. If you'll all join me, thank you for coming to Board of Education meeting tonight. We're going to stand at the Pledge of Allegiance really quick. Superintendent Callahan, why don't you lead?
Happy to. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. So we are reconvening from closed session, which takes us now to item number 5, public hearing. 5.1, public hearing, contract reopeners with the Petaluma Federation of Teachers, Adult Educators Local 1881, CFT, AFT, and the Petaluma City Elementary and the Petaluma Joint Union High School Districts for the 2017-2018 school year. Going once, going twice? Do you want me to gavel up? There you go. All right, moving on. Item 6, adoption and approval of the agenda. 6.1, approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Who gets it? Any questions, comments, polls? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, approval of the minutes. 7.1, approval of the minutes of the January 9th, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, problems? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now the fun stuff. Item 8, special recognitions, reports, and presentations. We're going to start with Students of the Month for January 2018. You're doing my little glasses up with me. I saw it. I snuck a peek. Okay, let's start with Kenilworth Junior High School since they're first in our row. Do we have reference on it? And so how this goes is the school representative will come up and they will call up who's going to be first. Wait one sec. And then we will, after you tell us who you are, and then we will applaud for them. They will come up and they will get to hear wonderful things about themselves and then get their beautiful award. So take it away. You are?
I'm Josie Waldman, and I'll just do
Do you want to tell us which one? Because we have 2, right? So
Yeah.
tell us which one you want to call up first.
Louise.
All right, Luis Lopez, come on up. I'm going to smile really big and look at the camera while we embarrass you. All kinds of good things about you. Parents are welcome to slide around and take pictures if you like.
Louise is described by his teachers as a conscientious student with a great attitude who consistently achieves at the highest level bringing his best to class every day. He is seen on our campus as a respectful young man with a strong work ethic who is positive and works well with classmates. His math teacher says that Luis is a collaborative partner that all kids want to have. Outside of school, Luis plays soccer and has done so since he was 5 years old. His current position is midfielder. At Kenilworth, he participates in our cross-country and track teams. In track, he ran the 4x400, the 800, and the 1600. He was able to compete in the league finals and helped bring a win in 4x400. His fellow students also see his potential and aptitude on the field, noting his speed and ability. Luis lives with his older brother and younger sister. His mom knows that Luis has so many great qualities. Some of the things that have helped him to be successful and maintain success in school are being organized and always putting his schoolwork first. He gets home and does his homework, putting all of his attention into it. On the weekends, Luis works with his dad, who is a landscaper. His parents note how proud they are to have a son like Luis. And we are so proud and thankful to have a student like Luis representing Kenilworth. Congrats, Luis.
Family with you tonight? If not, I can call someone out. Are these your family? Yeah. Can we stand up, please? Who's with you tonight? Mom? Thank you. And next,
Amaya Grant.
a little louder.
Amaya Grant.
There we go.
Amaya is described by her teachers as friendly, respectful, kind, patient, and a role model. They also talk about her great attitude, positive nature, and leadership skills. For her elective period, Amaya works as a TA for her previous year's history teacher. He appreciates the hard work and dedication she puts into assisting students on assignments and her willingness to add to discussions. Outside of school, Amaya has played water polo for the last 4.5 years and has been on a swim team for 7 years. She also spends a lot of time volunteering. She has volunteered for the last 3 years at a nature preserve, and her favorite thing there is taking seniors on hikes. She has also been actively involved with habitat restoration in the Bay Area. Another volunteer activity she takes part in is with Boost Camp, an organization that helps people with motor disabilities achieve greater freedoms. She enjoys this because she works mainly with children. Maya also likes to travel a lot. Some of her favorite places to travel are to Rhode Island and Spain, where she can also visit with family. Her mom says Amaya has always been a very independent, decisive, unafraid person. She loves children and has known that she wanted to be an NICU nurse since she could talk. She enjoys caring for others, especially children and people with special needs. She doesn't take no for an answer and will work tirelessly to find solutions to any problem she faces. Mr. Caldwell states she is wise beyond her years and has a wonderful sense of humor, a good student as well as a good person. We are so proud to have this wonderful student representing Kenilworth. Congratulations, Amaya.
Yeah, my mom, my dad, and my brother.
Stand up so you can acknowledge yourself. Okay, let's Petaluma Junior High next. Hi. Who would you like to? Oh, tell us who you are.
I'm Andrew Heller, and Petaluma Junior High School is pleased to present Audrey Looper as one of our January 2018 Students of the Month. Audrey was born in the city of San Francisco on March 12, 2004. Now as a young woman, there is much to life that interests Audrey. She is an excellent student, a graceful athlete, and an engaging performer. Her goal is to continue to do well in school, maintain her gymnastic skills, eventually attend a top university, and travel the world. Her math teacher says, Audrey certainly does beautiful work and takes responsibility for her own learning. In addition to her academics, Audrey is in the PJHS Honors Band. She's an amazing gymnast and practices her gymnastic skills with great rigor. As an elementary student at Grant, Audrey was involved in the Girls on the Run group and competed in several 5K foot races. She also enjoys baking, traveling, listening to music, interior design, reading, and spending time with her friends. Her parents add, as her parents, we are so proud of Audrey and the passion, dedication, and commitment she applies towards her academic endeavors. Being a student at PJHS, she has gained so much joy and fulfillment, and we know her experiences and achievements will set her up for much success in the future. Audrey Leeper is a model student, and we are pleased to have her represent Petaluma Junior High School for the Student of the Month Award.
I just want to say you don't have to be worried about getting hugged by the school board unless we've known you since you were 5. I didn't mean to make anyone else nervous. And I see your families here in the second row and Dad's in the back. Yes. You too, little Liberty.
Petaluma Junior High School is pleased to present Joey Bruga as one of our January 2018 Students of the Month. Joey was born on December 20th, 2003 in Santa Rosa. He's an excellent student, an avid sports enthusiast, and an all-around responsible and caring young man. Joey is also a blossoming musician, playing music with the PJHS Honors Band. One of Joey's goals is to have a successful educational experience. He plans on earning straight A's throughout high school, attending a good university, and earning a good living in a job that he enjoys and is productive. Joey has already begun his journey on this path, earning nearly all A's in very challenging classes in his first semester of 8th grade. His teachers have a lot to add. In history, Joey is a student whose calm and quiet nature hides a mind at work. He's mature beyond his years. His PE teacher says, Joey is very kind and respectful to all. He's always striving to raise the bar and push himself to do his absolute best. And in math, Joey is a great student and also a great teacher. He is very helpful and patient with his team. Outside of school, Joey is a very active young man. He maintains regular paid working hours at his stepbrother's landscaping business. He enjoys watching and playing basketball and is a huge New Orleans Saints football fan. He also has a keen interest in the history and story of Batman. Joey may also be a talented fundraiser, being among the top 10 students at Penn Grove who raised money for a school structure. His parents add, Joey is an all-around great kid. He continues to excel academically and is looking forward to high school. Joey is a friend and has kept the same circle of friends since kindergarten. Being a part of the PJHS band has been a terrific experience for Joey. He can accomplish anything he puts his mind to. Joey Bruga is a wonderful representative for Petaluma Junior High. We are proud to have him represent us for the Student of the Month Award.
Okay, how about Castrante?
Good evening, I'm Emily White from Casa Grande High School. I'm the AC president there, and I'm here to present the January Student of the Month, Monis Pharma.
Thank you.
Monis is a hardworking and dedicated senior at Casa Grande. His leadership qualities help him work well with his peers and participate in the community. He currently volunteers at the Multicultural Development Center in Santa Rosa, a school for underprivileged children, and for the Petaluma Youth Commission. He also participates in clubs on campus and plays varsity tennis. Monis' plan after high school is to attend a 4-year university and then go on to medical school. Science and medicine has interested him since he first lived in India and saw his grandfather's clinic in practice. He further cultivated this interest by volunteering in a hospital in India, working closely with doctors, communicating directly with patients, and standing in on surgeries. In his free time, he enjoys spending time with his family, playing basketball or tennis, or playing the piano. Congratulations, Monis.
Do you have any friends and family with
Oh,
you?
yes, my mom, dad.
For our second student of the month, we have Sam Fuller.
The whole time. Be a smile too. Tell me about that.
Sam Fuller academics to be a pivotal aspect of his life. But his most defining qualities were formed outside of the classroom. He has been a proud martial artist for over 10 years and currently holds rank of 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo. Now working as an instructor, he uses his experience to lead martial artist class in the studio. This has not only been his only leadership role, however, he was elected mayor of the Mock City in the California State Boys Program. Becoming the mayor of Boys State, a prestigious and selective enterprise run by American Legion, entailed directed a group of 50 prominent young leaders in the interactions of Mock State government. Sam is also an avid tennis player and is very passionate about preserving the environment and the world. This summer, he traveled to Thailand with Asian elephants and learned about their struggles. He was given the opportunity to live in an elephant village and used his time to bond with an elephant named Juan. This time with the Thai included a foreign exchange with a local school, elephant upkeep, which included bathing, feeding, harvesting, herb collection, and other things, dam building to prevent village floods, and intense sepak takraw lessons in the mud with mahouts. He is very excited to attend a 4-year university experience even more of his amazing world. Wow. Congratulations.
I'm here with my mom and my dad.
And maybe a best friend.
Honestly, I were voted best bromance for the yearbook. So.
I'm not doubting it. I'm not doubting it. Okay, last but not least, Petaluma High.
We only have one student vote tonight, and that is Shannon Stoll. I'm Catherine Wood, and I'm the ASB Vice President at Petaluma. For the past 4 years, Shannon Stoll has taken over a dozen AP courses and honors courses, has maintained a 4.3 GPA, and has played varsity golf. Throughout high school, Shannon has been fascinated by science. 2017 was the first year of the merge between the Petaluma Marine Bio and the Costa Fisheries class. Here, he took initiative in the after-school program. Along with the participation in fundraisers to the Marine Bio program, Shannon took the Tech 2 certification course under Mr. Hubacker. This allowed him to take place in COSA's effort to prove to the state that there is a return of the Chinook salmon population. Shannon has worked with various organizations to help improve his community. He has spent hundreds of hours working with children of all ages under the Mentor Me and after-school programs. He was able to go to Westminster Woods Outdoors Education Camp as a camp leader for the same children he worked with at McKinley Elementary School. When the Sonoma and Napa County fires hit, he acted quickly, volunteering for the Children's Center at the fairgrounds. Here, Shannon helped by donating toys and loading shipments of school supplies to schools damaged by the fires. Aside from his volunteer work, Shannon started up a small business by going to farmers markets and flea markets and peddling succulents. Additionally, he worked as an assistant to 2 working and disabled parents for his last 2 years of high school. Being a good academic student is only part of being a good person. It's the choices someone makes outside of the classroom that make an impact. He shows this not only through his schoolwork, but also through his interests and passions. Shannon plans to attend UC next fall to study neuroscience, hoping to one day become a doctor. Congratulations, Shannon.
Always the highlight of our meeting, the student reports and the student of the month. I say this often, I may be sounding redundant, but sometimes it's a little intimidating. You all are so amazing. Makes me feel like a little bit of an underachiever up here. And we want to thank the family and close friends that do so much to support their students. And for the students that come up and read the reports, it's not easy, especially if it's your first time, and you always all do a really amazing job. Let me see when we can take a little break. Oh, we're going to hang on. We'll take a break in just a couple of moments. Let me get a couple of things done, and then we'll take a break so you can make a graceful exit. So next, we're going to do McDowell's school report, 8.2. There you are. Come on down.
so pleased to be in front of the board today. It's been a long time since McDowell has been represented by some students here, so we could not be more pleased to be here. These students have worked extremely hard on our presentation, and I hope you enjoy it today. As you can see, we've got Jaden Martinez, Ricky Mendoza-Che, and Raul Guzman, 4th and 5th grade representatives from McDowell here to present to you tonight. So, without further ado, every day at McDowell, we are improving our programs, events, and instruction to pursue our very ambitious vision statement.
Achievement is important to me because you can think about solving problems and using strategies.
At McDowell, we focus on our learning our math skills and English speaking and social studies.
We at McDowell achieve awards that include respect, responsibility, passion, and perseverance.
Jaden's absolutely right that we focus on 4 core values at McDowell, and we are able to discuss and recognize these values during our monthly Friday Flyers assemblies.
Respect is a value when we show kindness.
Responsibilities when you remember to charge your iPad and do your homework, also to underline and play.
Compassion is something nice. You show compassion when you feel what someone else is feeling.
Perseverance is when you never give up.
And just keep on trying.
Even though it gets harder and harder.
Last year, this was a photo of some 3rd grade students with Miss Anderson, our principal. It was her first year on the job.
Jogathon was a fundraiser and for having exercise. It was in November 2017.
As you can see, Roberto is showing compassion to this little girl. Compassion is one of our McDowell values.
Here we have Miss Bailey's 5th graders with their Monarch water bottles in front of the Monarch painting.
At McDowell, we have teachers as refs. Here's Mr. Martinson and Mr. Doyle. We play flag football and soccer after eating our lunch. We practice during recess.
For Fiesta Navideña, each class or grade sings special songs to celebrate the holidays. It's fun because we got to sing to people in our families, and you can buy food and drinks.
The 5th and 4th graders here are giving a surprise to the seniors. Some of us were kind of shy, so we showed our McDowell value of perseverance to show respect to the seniors.
We can change the community by helping fish stay alive and thinking about endangered animals. Here we had the trout eggs and fish tanks, and then we let them go free when they were fries.
Here we had 2 students talking about their learning and passion. Our McDowell teachers have a book club together, a study academic conversation, and make sure students are speaking and listening while they learn.
Collaboration is something special because you meet up with someone and work with them. You can finish the work faster when you're working with someone.
We tell parents if they can help us with their events and field trips we have. The PTA helps us raise money.
At McDowell, you can get to work with youngs like friends, cousins, families, and buddies.
We do projects with our buddies and read with them.
We have art docents, and they help us do special art creations with certain materials. Imagine.
So next year we're going to have 6th grade, so we want to raise money as a school for the 6th grade classroom and 6th grade camp.
Boys and Girls Club is a community for students whose parents don't pick them up right away. It has activities like sports, art, dance, torch club, passport, and more.
People are here helping the community to fix the creek by planting trees.
They are putting up fences so the plants will grow. The 3rd graders are really helping the community by planting trees.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Now, do you have any questions?
That was so great.
Great job.
I have a question. Who is the Monarch mural new at your school?
Yeah, let's cruise back to that slide.
Beautiful. And who painted that?
It was a great opportunity for an alum to come back. She was actually last year a Casa Grande senior, was interested in giving back to the McDowell community as a senior. She came up with some concepts for the McDowell Monarch. There's one not pictured here that's actually the caterpillar on the other side, and then the monarch where the upper grades are. We were able to work with Maxfield Bala. He came in to sort of mentor Jasmine through the process so she could have an idea of what that mural process looks like. She pulled in several of her friends from CASA, and she and her friends worked their tails off to make some of our walls, our exterior walls, beautiful. You can see it all the way from Safeway, which is really nice, but it's interior to our school because it's meant to be for our students to enjoy and have a beautiful space.
Beautiful. Gorgeous. Really nice.
Great job.
You guys did a wonderful job.
Yes.
Thank you. Y'all will hang in there with me. We have one more quick presentation that would be really nice if we had some folks still in the room. Let me get my glasses. 8.3, Rotary Lend a Hand Grant Award. Come on down.
Superintendent Callahan and the board, it's wonderful to be back here, same time as last year. My name is Libby Fitzgerald, and I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Petaluma Valley. For those of you who don't know what Rotary is, Rotary International is a service club, the largest service club in the world. Internationally, one of their largest projects is eradication of polio, probably what many of you kids have never heard of because it doesn't exist in the United States anymore. Locally, one of Rotary's passions is working with kids in the school, students and education, and grants to teachers, and that's why I'm here today. This is our 14th year for Rotary's Lend a Hand to Education, where we give teachers anywhere from $200 to $250 grants for programs in their classrooms or for field trips. And these go to individual teachers, not to the whole school. This year we were inundated with applications. We had over 150 applications this year. And at first we thought, oh boy, just after the fires, we would never be able to fund even half of those. But I'll tell you something, this year we raised a total of almost $23,000, which is the largest amount we've raised in 14 years. So that goes to show you the generosity of Rotary and the community. So of those funds, the Petaluma School District, being the largest school district, is the one who received quite a large number of funds. And those of you who are here tonight from McDowell Elementary and Casa Grande and Petaluma High and Kenilworth and Petaluma Junior High, there are teachers in all of your schools that received grants. This year, the majority of the applications were for STEM projects. That seems to be very popular in the schools. So in the Petaluma School District, we were able to fund 28 grants for STEM projects, 11 grants for reading and writing, and 9 for field trips, 7 for arts and music, and 2 for physical education, for a total of 57 grants in the Petaluma School District, for a total of $11,636. So we have already given the check to the Petaluma School District because we wanted the teachers to access those funds as soon as possible. The check was actually in the amount of $11,086. And in addition to that, we had some in-kind grants. One was from a solar company that donated some various components of solar panels to go into the schools to teach about that. And so I would like to thank all of the teachers in the entire Petaluma School District for everything you do for our kids and their education here in Petaluma. Rotary is so proud of you, and one of these days we'll see all of those kids as members of Interact in the high school and maybe as Rotarians one of these days, giving back to your community. So thank you very much.
Libby, we can. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for all the work you all do, and for contributing to our schools and our students. There's no immeasurable way to thank you, and we appreciate it so much. And if y'all will tolerate just a moment, I think we'd like to take a picture.
We're gonna ask our.
Look how we're all pointing the wrong way.
Oh, you want me to?
Michael, you're a Rotarian. Why don't you get on that?
Come on, Mike.
Go take a picture with Gary. They're gonna take a picture. I don't know. They're dressed so fancy with his Chandler Bing's.
We'll just be right here.
Here, you just hand it.
Yeah, just hand
Don't
it
get
over.
money off that too.
Yeah, we'll go.
I was thinking the same.
Like, here's the checks.
Okay.
Alright. Ready? Let's see, I'm gonna take a couple. 1, 2, 3. And another 1, 2, 3. And last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will take just maybe a 3 or 4 minute recess, because it sounds like there are some students in the audience that do homework a lot. You may go ahead and exit if you need to. You're welcome to stay, but if you need to get home and do homework.
I should be part of that. We need to get that back to the center, but yes, all the time we
All right, we are all back, so we will reconvene. Thank you. We're so quiet now. Let me find my place. I got it. Okay, next item, 8.4, update on governor's state budget proposal for 2018-2019. Take it away, Chris Thomas, Chief Business Official.
Thank you.
Still Chris, how'd you say?
Still Chris. So I only have about 75 slides to go through. Just
I
checking.
am not surprised.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. Battery's dead, so I'll need to do that.
Oh,
That's
do you want,
okay.
or do you want it?
No, I'll just, yeah. So as you know, every year, the governor comes out with his budget proposal for the state budget for the upcoming fiscal year on or about January 10th. It's usually January 10th, sometimes they release a little bit early. So this year is no exception. So we're gonna just go over somewhat of the 30,000 foot highlights of that budget proposal for, can we actually say 2018-19? It's kind of crazy that we're already looking at that year. So I know this is really small, but Prop 98 is that proposition which basically guarantees the minimum level of funding for school, for K-14 education in California. The interesting thing about this is it's actually kind of created the minimum, and that's generally what we get. We don't get a lot of money over Prop 98. This was supposed to set a floor, but in some ways it created a ceiling for K-14 education, because we only get the minimum level of funding if we're lucky. There have been years when the state legislature has suspended Prop 98, we've actually received less than. And there's maybe a few years where we get a little bit more, but generally we get the minimum level of funding. So we're gonna go through some of these proposals, the local control funding formula, some one-time discretionary funding. Some of these other things, childcare, state preschool, we don't receive those funds, and so it really isn't applicable to us. But this is generally kind of what's in the major proposals. County offices of education are getting some money, I'll talk about that a little bit more. We'll touch on special education, and then the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, or what we call CCEE, and that really relates to the local control accountability plans in districts that may get into a situation where they need additional support. What's not in the education budget, it's kind of an important piece. You probably can't read this, but basically there's no additional funding to raise us to the top 10 in the state. So remember, in California, we're the 7th largest economy in the world, and yet we're funded at around the lowest of the 50 states. So we hover between anywhere from 46th to 48th in the nation, even though we are the 7th largest economy in the world. And that hasn't changed. And there's a hope and certainly request that they increase funding for on per student basis in California, but that's not in this budget. There's also, we know we've got pension reform that has come. We know that we're getting hit with huge pension increases we've talked about in the past, both for the state teachers retirement system and the public employees retirement system. There's no additional funding built into this budget to address that for public education. We have public school transportation. They continue to fund that through the local control funding formula, but there's no increases for that. And just as a reminder, in order to keep those funds, we have to operate transportation and at least spend a minimum, that amount on transportation. Any districts that stop using that actually lose that money. And anyway, so that's home to school transportation. And then there's no money here to increase the base level of funding for special education, which is the AB 602 block grant funding, actually. So, you know, when Governor Brown a few years ago, he created Proposition 2, which basically established a minimum state reserve. That was the whole rainy day fund at the state level, and it also created some maximums on school district reserves if we met certain thresholds. And there's 4 thresholds that are talked about in the slide. Prop 98, the maintenance factors fully funded or repaid that were funded based on test 1. Under the LCFF or under Prop 98, there's test 1, there's test 2, there's test 3. We're not going to get into those details. We would have to be funded on test 1, which we're not funded in this proposal. And then there is the Prop 98 sufficient to address both enrollment growth and the COLA, which it is in this proposal, and are they putting money into the rainy day fund, which they are. So 3 of the 4 tests in this budget proposal are met, not all 4, and so the maximum reserves for districts have not kicked in. And that maximum, by the way, was 6%. I think it's been changed to 10% now. But it has not kicked in under this budget proposal. So here are some of the LCFF target funding factors, and you can see it's by grade span. We've talked about that. K3 has 1 level, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. GSA stands for grade span adjustment, and so that's formerly known as class size reduction. For K3, they give us $767. And remember, under the former K3, it was almost $1,100. So under the LCFF, that actually was reduced pretty significantly. But it was also in respect to the fact that we're at 24-1 under the LCFF versus 20-1. And then there's a little bit of career tech ed adjustment for the 9th through 12th for $232. So these would be the new rates under his proposal. This is how it breaks down. So we talk about the base, which is that adjusted base that includes grade span adjustment and the career tech ed. And then there's supplemental and concentration grant funding for school districts that receive it. We receive supplemental funds for those unduplicated, UPP stands for your unduplicated pupil population. So we do, or percentage, so we do receive supplemental funding. We don't receive concentration grant. You only get concentration grant if your UPP is over 55%. Ours hovers between 38 and 46%, depending on the district. But this is how some of that works. So it's basically 20% of the base or 50% of the base. So the LCFF was intended to be implemented over a 7-year period of time. The target year was 2021. And it's important to remember, the LCFF full funding is supposed to get us to 0708 levels adjusted for inflation. So this is supposed to get our funding back to where it was pre-recession, adjusted for inflation over the past 7 years. This budget proposal fully funds the LCFF in 18-19, so 2 years ahead of schedule. It sounds like a lot, it's not, because we're already at about 97% of funding under the LCFF. So when it talks about fully gap funding it, when we talk about that later, that full gap funding is only 3%. So the first year of LCFF funding, remember, we had 11.9, just under 12% of gap funding. This is gonna fully fund the 3% that's left, so basically a third of what that first year was. And then after that, we're gonna go to COLA. What this slide shows is how many districts actually fall, of the 1,000 districts roughly in the state of California, how many of them fall into that unduplicated pupil count percentage. And so you can see 9 to 20%, let me see if I can read those numbers, about 89 districts fall into that 0 to 20%. About 151 districts fall into the 20 to 40%. That's generally where half of our district resides. About 217 into 40 to 60%, 251 into 60 to 80%, and then 237 into 80 to 100%. And that's, again, of the unduplicated pupil percentage.
I'm sorry, explain it to me again.
So remember how we talked about you get supplemental funding if you're up to 55% or over, you know, and then over 55% you get the concentration. This shows you how many districts are in the percentages of the unduplicated pupil count. So there's 89 districts that have a pupil count, of unduplicated pupil count percentage of 20% or less.
Could you explain what unduplicated pupil
Count is,
Yes.
or percentage?
Yes.
So it's, so the LCFF is intended to provide equity, basically, to look at the fact that some kids need more to get the same. And so they came up with this funding formula in which the percentage of foster youth, English learners, or socioeconomically disadvantaged students, based generally primarily on free and reduced meal applications, that unduplicated count, so I might be a foster youth who's also an EL learner and I'm socioeconomically disadvantaged, I only count as one, even though I might qualify in all three categories. That's why it's called unduplicated. And so this is the unduplicated count. So if we have 10% of that population, we get, for that 10%, supplemental funding, which is 20% of the base. If we had 60%, up to 55%, we would get the 20%, and then over 55%, we get an additional 50% on the base. That's called concentration grant. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this kind of shows you how many districts fall into those various ranges. Okay? Okay. So, transitioning to full funding under the LCFF. So, this is basically showing up to 12,000 on the left-hand side. The green represents that 2018-19, this is the amount of funding for those categories. So we just looked at those categories of UPP, right? 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. So these are the same ranges. And it kind of shows you your base funding, which is in the blue. And then it shows your LCFF increase from 13-14 through 17-18. So it shows you that orange is kind of the increase we've received under the LCFF. And then the green is how much they're proposing to give for each one of those categories. And remember, we kind of hover between the second and third bar. Okay? So one of our districts is around 38% and one is around 45%. So,
I'm sorry, do me a favor. Can you really quick go back 2 slides so I can write down a number to ask you about in a minute? Oh, actually, never mind. I've got. Okay.
And that number is per pupil. That's how much
Yes.
you're going to get annually per pupil.
Yeah, so go back 1 slide, just to highlight, because I know you can't read this slide, it's small. So if you look at the 0 to 20%, which is that first column on the left, the green amount shows $443 per student. So for districts that have less than 20% of UPP, they're estimated to get about $443 under this LCFF proposal.
per pupil.
For the year, yes. If you look at the next category, because half of our, or part of our students are in the next category, it's 464. Compare that to the very last category, 637. So if we were in the last category, it's 80 to 100%, we would be getting, under this proposal, $637 versus roughly 464 to 489. So
Make up the gap.
Yeah, so for that supplemental concentration grant funding, so that's kind of how some districts are getting as much as 637. We're getting anywhere from 464 to 489 under this proposal. Remember, this is just a proposal, there's a long way to go. But it kind of shows you the disparity in what districts are
It
receiving.
shows you almost 500 districts are getting $2,000 more a student than we are.
Yeah,
If you add up, if you go back one slide, and you add up the 251 and the 237, there's a math teacher in the audience, forgive me. I believe that adds up to 488 districts that are getting 10,000 plus per student.
Almost 11.
They're getting significantly
They're
more
getting
than that.
$2,000, and isn't more a student.
That's it.
Now, isn't there a bill moving through the legislature?
We're gonna get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this shows you how
Right, that's why.
the disparity in the LCFF funding, this is based on averages, because remember, every K-3 gets a little different, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. But this shows you on the average, when you look at those districts, and you compare the 0 to 20 versus the 80 to 100%, it's a huge disparity in what, at the end of the day, districts are getting overall, but certainly what they're getting in this budget proposal. And we, remember, we're more on the left, we're not on the right, because those two columns on the right are getting concentration grant funding, and we're not. So it's kind of.
And I heartfelt get the reasoning. It's just a lot. I mean, it's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. Okay. This just talks about how, yes, originally it was a 7-year proposal, and we're funding it, the LCFF's looking at funding it 2 years early, and that the 17-18 Act funded the LCFF at 97% of target. That's why we're only 3% away from 100%. So I'm talking about fully funding it, that's really only a 3% increase of the gap. And so that's just what that slide shows. Go ahead. So with the final phase of implementation of the LCFF, really the state's moving into accountability phase. And I'm not saying much here because I don't want to move into the LCAP area, which I know Cliff will do presentations on the local control fund, on the local control accountability plan. But the proportionality is really going to change with this, because basically at full implementation, that proportionate share then, the supplemental funding is now at 100%. And there's many districts that are going to struggle with that, because the way the proportionality calculations worked, if you didn't spend all of it the prior year, it kind of reduced it or understated it for the future years. And so there's going to be a huge jump for many districts. Now, we already spend above our proportionality for our supplemental programs, and so I don't anticipate we're going to have as serious of an issue as other districts. But it's something that people are talking about, because with fully funding it, it means that proportionality calculation actually will jump at the end. And so that's something, as we drill down into this and start doing our LCFF calculations for next year, we'll be taking a close look at it for both of our districts, because remember, we do 7 different LCFF calculations. We do one for each of our charters, and we do one for secondary and one for elementary. So we'll be taking a close look at proportionality as we develop next year's budget to make sure that the supplemental actions and services and expenditures where we're improving or increasing services to students meet the proportionality. So it's just kind of talks about that. And then that CCEE, or the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, that's really the organization that county offices of education can refer districts to provide support if they're in a situation where they're having a hard time showing through the metrics and through the dashboard and everything else, that we're actually moving that bar for those target population of students. Again, I didn't go into that in a lot of detail, but it certainly becomes part of our budget development process. as we know, the budget development process and the LCAP go hand in hand. Okay, let's talk a little bit about one-time discretionary funds. So, you know, the governor in this budget proposal is proposing $295 per ADA. That's roughly about 2.1 million for our district. If we have 7,100 ADA times 295, it's 2,084,000, so it's close to 2.1 million. And again, this is a proposal. Last year he proposed more, and at the end of the day we got less. So we don't know what we're going to get at this point. This is kind of the starting place. Expenditures are to be determined by the local governing board and can be used for any one-time purpose. Like prior years, this is helping to pay down that wall of debt that the governor has been trying to get rid of, related to all those old mandates that they haven't funded districts for many, many years. And they're estimating that if in fact the 1.8 billion is approved at the end of the day, that there would be about $1 billion left in unpaid old mandates. So anyway, this just kind of talks about that one-time discretionary funds. We'll be watching the May revise, or looking forward to the May revise very careful to see how this does or doesn't change. Because this is one of the areas that probably will, you know, if the governor, at the end of the day, if revenues change over the next few months, and so in his May revise, he has to reduce this down a bit. Because remember, this budget's based on Prop 98. So they're estimating revenues and saying, okay, if revenues come in at this, the Prop 98 minimum guarantee is that, so this budget meets that dollar amount. If revenues go down and the Prop 98 guarantee goes down, then the May revise will go down. Vice versa, it could go up too if the revenues come in stronger. But if they weren't down, I could see them, the state legislature, the budget committee reducing the one-time funds, and that's what happened last year.
And are there limitations around the one-time funds, where you can spend them on it?
The only limitations,
One-time purpose.
the only limitations are they're one time, and so you can't spend them on ongoing
Right.
things.
Salaries and benefits.
Right. And this is like the fourth year of one-time money.
Right.
So, but it is paying down that big wall of debt that had built up for many years through the mandated cost profile.
So what do we typically use? Curriculum.
We use it for curriculum, we use it for technology. We're looking at textbook adoptions this year. We have $400,000 or $500,000 set aside for that. So in prior years, we hadn't necessarily identified specific one-time things. And for our district, because we're deficit spending to the tune of about $1 million a year, it really is basically kind of pushing that deficit spending down the road. So we don't have specific things in this budget or in prior budgets that say, okay, when the one-time money goes away, this goes away, and that's why we have a structural deficit in our budget. But this does help us with that. It basically buys us planning time to figure out how to deal with that. I wanted to touch on special education funding, because special education funding is a big part of our budget. Special education is an important program that we support. And the special education funding, because there's no additional money, it will fluctuate up or down for various reasons. So this slide kind of shows that. It basically says, if the SELPA enrollment goes up, the SELPA's funding goes up. And the SELPA is the Special Education Local Plan Area. If the district enrollment goes down at the same time, the district funding goes down. So the SELPA may get more money, but our money will go down. The opposite is also true. We may have an increase in enrollment, but if the overall SELPA is going down in enrollment, then the SELPA's money will shrink, and therefore our money shrinks as well. Because even though we might be getting a bigger share, it's a bigger share of a smaller pie. And then, if the SELPA...
The SELPA money is categorical, right? It's not
It
general
is,
funds.
it's used to support that program, but we're making such a big contribution into that program that it has a huge impact, because it impacts, you know, if that goes down, our contribution goes up. If that goes up, our contribution goes down. So it has a direct relationship to our undistributed. And then the alternative is also true. If both the self-enrollment's down and our enrollment's down, then the money goes down even further. So figure the piggy bank was full, and this kind of shows you that enrollment in special education has a direct impact on our funding, which then has a direct impact on our contribution.
And is that where we are in that third piggy bank?
I don't know where the SELF is, so I'm not sure where our SELF comes into play. This is why they have the SELF Finance Committee that I've been trying to attend. So, but I just wanted the board to be aware of it, that these are the types of things that are generally out of our control. You know, we're trying to throw the dart where we think our money's gonna end up. We're trying to throw the dart where our expenditures are gonna end up and where our revenues are gonna end up. Special education is a huge program for us, and trying to estimate both expenditures and revenues can be very challenging. So
Our
this-
SELPA is deficit spending. They're going to be increasing their contribution, all the districts will be increasing their contribution.
It's going from $10 to $15 per ADA.
Well, that's significant.
Yeah,
To
back to
support
what
the
it
SELF,
used to be
to
in,
support just the SELF.
back to what it basically used to be in 07, right?
And the feds still aren't contributing all the way they're supposed to, right?
Right, I mean theoretically, under the old J50
40%.
model, and now I'm going back to the 90s and before, there was a J50 model of special education funding where the state was supposed to fund 60%, the feds were supposed to fund 40%, and, you know, that really has never happened on either level, from the
Right.
state or the feds.
So unrestricted makes a difference.
Yes, and for us, it's a big amount, so, you know, we'll be doing, at the Budget Advisory Committee, not this month, but next month, we're gonna be looking at some of those programs, just so we have an understanding of where some of these monies go, because every year, special education is going up, for some of it driven by revenues going up or down. So again, some of it's out of our control. It's such a large program, I wanted to kind of at least touch on it. And there's no additional money to increase the funding, so. To that end, this is still, SWD stands for Students with Disabilities. This kind of slide kind of shows you in the blue the percent change in enrollment generally, and then the percent change in students with disabilities. So this is at a statewide level.
This is statewide.
At a statewide level, even though enrollment is flat, students with disabilities are being identified at a much higher level. Even though enrollment's flat, enrollment in special education is going up.
That's interesting.
And that's statewide. We certainly have that situation here in Sonoma County. So this is just enacting the state budget. It gives a little bit of information on that. January 10th, this budget proposal comes out, and then all the trailer bills are released, and then it basically goes into committee. Early spring, they're haggling over the budget at the legislative level, and then in June, we'll pass the budget. It's important to know we used to have late budgets every year, but since the law changed, we now have on-time budgets.
But on time meaning at the end of the school year.
Yes, by July 1st.
And that's for the 18-19 school year.
Yes, and we have to adopt our budget in advance of the state having a budget, which is always problematic. So,
Isn't that wonderful?
I know, it chokes me up too.
yes, I get very choked up. So the school services, SSC stands for School Services of California. They do a dartboard every year that school districts in California generally use to build our budget assumptions for revenues around, and to a certain lesser extent for expenditures. So this kind of shows you what that dartboard is looking like for 18-19. It shows the factors for the LCFF, and then down below it shows the statutory COLA, what is estimated to be that it's kind of formatting issue, but you can see the COLA for this year. I'm looking under factor statutory COLA, 1.56. Right now, next year's COLA is estimated to be 2.51, 2.41 for the out year, and 2.80. Now, in May, the May revise comes out with, here is the statutory COLA based on the formula in statute through the revenues collected through April. So in May, the May revise will have the actual statutory COLA for 18-19. Right now, this is just an estimate based on most likely either UCLA or the Department of Finance. I'm not sure which one on this. Okay, but I wanted to show you, these are the factors that we start working with, and then we'll look to the May revise to adjust them further. Going down, this shows you the difference between first interim and second interim. So at first interim, this is the gap funding it's looking at in particular, and so at first interim, the Department of Finance gap closure factors showed 17-18 at 43.19, 18-19, it's 66.12, 64.92, and then 100% in 2021. And you can see at this point for second interim, we're going to be assuming 100% in 18-19. But again, that's 100% of 3%. So it's still just 3% versus 66% of 3%. Okay? So this slide just kind of shows you the revenue change when we look at that LCF revenue per ADA based on an average district. And you can see in 18-19, at first interim, it was supposed to be 10,878. Again, these are based on averages. It goes from that to 11,107. But when you look at 2021, it's the same. So it just means we're getting our money faster. But at the end of the day, the target hasn't changed. So it means our multi-year projections are going to show increases faster. But it also means that as of 18-19, we're going to see a little spike in revenue because we're going to get that full 3% potentially. But then we're only going to see increases in COLA. So remember, we've had 5 years now of gap funding getting us to our target a couple of years earlier. But that gap funding now goes away because now we're at target.
And then Gary, would they start with a new gap funding?
No, there will be no more gap funding. Now we're
You're just back in
fully,
2007, 2008.
Well, right, well, how do we get to 2021?
well then it's gonna be based on COLA. So if
Yeah.
COLA's 1%, you're gonna get a 1%. If COLA's 0 or negative, you get 0 or negative. So that's my point, and that's what a lot of districts are now gonna have to struggling with, is that
Yeah, we got increase.
we've been living on gap funding for the past
Yeah.
5 or 6 years. And that gap funding has gotten us back to 07-08 adjusted for inflation levels of funding. But now we're gonna go back to, after 18-19, we're gonna go back to COLA, whatever the cost of living adjustment is by statute. And if that's 1%, 1.56% this year. If we were at target last year, we would have only received 1.56%. When you layer that on top of the STRS and PERS increases that aren't gonna hit the final targets for those until 2021 or beyond with PERS, those are going to far exceed COLA funding. And so that's going to be the challenge that we as a district face as well as all the other 1,000 districts.
And they're all deficit spending as well.
Many of them, yes, if not most.
Many, right?
What index do they use for the COLA? Where do they come up with that? I mean, there's a number of different.
The COLA is in statute, so there's actually a formula in the law that they calculate based on many different factors, including revenues collected through April. And so it's a statutory COLA.
Okay.
So once it's calculated, it's done in statute.
There's a number of different indexes out there, just curious.
If you go back one slide, actually, for a second, I also want to show you, this is what's challenging with calculating our LCFF and why you'll see changes. See how the 17-18 factor, at first interim, it was 43.19, and now it's estimated to be 43.97. That's also a little bit of a floating gap funding, even in the current fiscal year. So that gap funding actually changes even within the year. It's not like the COLA where it's set, and that's the way it is. So I just wanted to point that out, that we have to use these dartboard numbers to do our calculations, but it also floats even within the current year. And that's why you'll see a little bit of fluctuation from one report to the next. Okay, last slide. So this is kind of the good news and the bad news. And so starting with the good news, higher than anticipated funding for 18-19. So again, we are getting 100% of the 3% versus 66% of the 3%. So it's going to boost our revenue for 18-19 a bit. And we're getting some one-time money. So, and that's the catch-up for prior years. The challenge becomes, and that goes into the however, or the but, if you will, we're going to go into a COLA environment, which we just kind of talked about. And we have CalSTRS and CalPERS increases. We've got health and welfare increases. You know, we don't really know what's going to happen at the federal level. So that's not even articulated here, but really, we've got some potential challenges with our federal funding and what's going to happen with that, even for the out years. It's going to be really hard to predict, and we get a lot of federal funding, so that's a challenge that's not even here. And most districts are gonna see their deficit spending growing. And so we have to be really mindful of that as we look at that one-time money. Again, we're kind of kicking the can down the road, and we're gonna have to talk about additional,
Cuts.
budget reductions, reconfiguration of programs, however you wanna say it. But remember, we also have to meet our proportionality. So we have to continue to increase or improve services to those students. We have to continue to move the bar, but we also have to make reductions to address some of these issues.
So in school, go ahead.
Can we use one-time money to pay forward the PERS and STIRS?
You definitely could, I mean, the board could certainly make a decision to say, we wanna set that aside in a separate fund, and hold it to help offset future costs or it's going into the reserves, which kind of essentially does the same thing. So that's certainly direction the board could give staff, that, hey, we wanna set some of that money aside. But by boosting up your reserves, you're essentially doing the same thing, because your reserves really are your savings account. But there is a mechanism where we could open a fund that was specifically dedicated for retirement, basically retirement costs, future retirement costs to help offset that. The problem is either way, it's one time.
So school finance for dummies. Our base funding is not meeting the cost to run education, particularly due to the new increase in the retirement benefits. And our LCAP has to prove that we're closing achievement gaps and raising student achievement while cutting programs to get rid of the deficit. If everyone's got that, that's your mission, to come up with some ideas for the next few days. Get back to me on that.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
And Chris, we're a little bit handicapped. I mean, it seems like,
Speak for yourself.
no, it seems weird, but because we do a good job on our achievements, and we're not heavily intense with socioeconomic, at least by state standards, or foster youth, or English language learners, correct? I mean, our percentages, that's why we're down the lower side of the columns there, right? So a disproportionate amount of money is going to try to those other school districts that have much higher percentages.
488 of them.
Yeah. I mean, so that weighs heavily on the budget as well, correct?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that, and this is what a lot of districts are coming to, the LCFF in concept is a really good idea.
Yes.
The challenge is $2,000 or $3,000 variance between students when we're getting funded the minimum.
Right.
That's
It's too
really
thin
where
already.
the conundrum is. It's too big of a gap between districts that are in that 80 to 100 percentile and what they're getting. And many of them are really, really large districts in LA. You're getting that lion's share of the funding. And then there's other school districts like us who are more in the average category when it comes to our UPP. That, for us to have that big of a variance per pupil is a huge amount of money. And so that's, I think, wasn't contemplated, and it wasn't as obvious in the early first few years of LCFF funding. It became more obvious as we got closer to target, and it's very obvious when you look at what those target levels are gonna be. So that's part of
literally
it.
has made me physically upset.
Well, you just put it in perspective, you've got an elementary school of 400 kids, and one school district is getting $800,000 more to fund program at that school site than another. That's
a lot of money. But here's our challenge. Here's one of the many challenges to educate our students, is that how are the 217 districts that are at the lower end going to convince the 488 districts that they're getting too much? Chew on that for a second. How are 488 districts are getting, like you said, $2,000 to $3,000 more a student than 217 of us?
It's not
If we
to
were all
the
voting,
districts to do
clearly.
that.
I
It's gotta
understand,
be
but if you're looking
legislative
for,
fix.
that's the thing though, but if, let's talk politics. If you've got 488 organizations lobbying you and 217, you gotta pick the 217, you gotta pick the 488. So I'm just,
Is there a new funding formula starting in 2021? Does LCFF go
No,
away?
this is, you know, basically, when we get to 18-19,
If we're fully
LCFF is
funded.
fully implemented,
Right.
and that
They've
is
done the
now the
catch-up in
norm.
their
Going
mind,
forward.
yes.
That's the norm, so LCFF, I believe is here to stay. It's taken us 5 or 6 years to get to that target, but it's not going anywhere. I think the question is, does it get tweaked? Does it get, you know what I mean? And that really comes down to, you know, is the 20%, is the 50% of concentration grants too high? Should the bases be higher?
Right.
And then the concentration supplemental be adjusted? I mean, I think those are the questions that the state legislature needs to grapple with a bit. But LCFF is not going anywhere.
and how well, we talked about it earlier, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the full collaborative California title. And so,
California Collaborative for Educational Excellence.
yep, that one. How well are they looking at the LCAP and what they're doing for their students with the 488 districts that are getting so much more?
That's not their charge.
No.
Their
Okay,
charge-
who's doing that?
there
Well,
isn't
there's-
a-
Is anyone doing that to prove that $3,000 more students
So
to those
I-
488 districts?
Well, I think that, so the LCAP process becomes an essential part of that. The stakeholders and really the county offices of education, they're becoming,
Man.
and I didn't go into all of those slides. I could have had a whole binder of slides. But there's a whole bunch of information, and I know that you guys went to this conference too. There's a whole information about how much more money county offices of education are getting. Because they were at full funding under their LCFF early on. They're getting additional funding to provide quote-unquote oversight and that whole accountability level for school districts. And so really, the metrics coming in and taking a look at the metrics and how districts, you know, are we measuring stuff? If stuff isn't working, are we making modifications? I mean, are we moving that bar is really the question. But the stakeholder process is also important, so.
But then who's evaluating? I mean, is the state really, I get that our county Office of Ed is going to look at the LCAPs for the schools within its jurisdiction. And then what? Who at the state looks at, I mean, wouldn't this seem like a really
what
appropriate
happened-
idea to look at the 217 of us that aren't getting as much money and the 488 that are, and see what their LCAPs look like and see if this is working?
So what happens
I'm
is
getting
that
mad,
every
sorry.
every school district submits their plans and their accountability program to their county office.
Right?
If they meet their goals, their targeted metrics, they're good. If they start showing, I'm really simplifying it. If
Yeah,
they-
remember the green, yellow, red,
If they start showing
Right.
distress
Dashboard.
orange?
or not meeting those goals, then they get a coach. I'm using the term nicely, and the coach is the collaborative. The collaborative comes in and works with you to turn it around. If you don't turn it around, there are some potential remedies that they would put in place. And so we're so early in the process
That's- I mean,
because
that's what it feels like.
they just came up with the metrics, literally. So the collaborative was established 2 years ago. They've just got their team together, and now we're moving into the accountability piece. So what's critical for us, as it relates to our LCAP, is we have to be able to say, this is how we're spending the money, and this is how we're measuring whether we're being successful or not. And that, we have to really be very diligent about measuring that and working with the county as they work with us to verify that.
I get that part, which is gonna be really hard to do.
Yeah.
Since all our costs are going up, we don't have enough money, we're in a deficit, and we're gonna have to make program cuts, yet we gotta make sure our LCAP is meeting the needs and raising achievement. I get that. It just feels to me like it's gonna take several years for the state to look back and see how this is working in comparison, and to see if adjustments need to be made.
So what you're saying, and it'll come forward as an action item in the next sequence. is people are asking the same question about the base funding, and they're concerned that there's not enough base funding for the districts, primarily because of all of the increases that are not funded that Chris talked about. And there's a bill coming forward, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that action item that I know we're going to be getting involved in, as we're considered one of the losers in the LCFF model. It's very simple. You know, remember when 3 months ago I brought you the information from the gentleman in Torrance, at the school district. They sent out a letter to all the districts that are receiving on an average $1,000 less than the average, the state average. And we were one of those districts that said, you know, we need to do something about this. And so in response to that, there's going to be legislation that's going to come forward in the next 2 weeks to try to at least get everybody at full funding. So
Because they're taking us back to they're taking us back to funding the 2007, 2008 with adjustments for inflation, yet the pension costs in 2007, 2008 were not what they are now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we paid about 8%, and I know it's got, I know it's got out for the staff as well.
Yes.
But for the district, we were paying like 8%, and when we're
8.25.
done, this is gonna be like 21%.
It is, STRS is going from 8.25 to 19.1. Hers is going up much more dramatically, but over a longer period of time. And they don't have that in the law yet, so that's going to be kind of that's one of those unknown factors that's really hard to plan for. It went up 2.04% last year, and it went up under 2% this year. So we're never really sure where the PERS rate, they make those, the PERS board will make those decisions in late May for the upcoming year. So we really have to go on where the experts are estimating that rate will be.
But you can see why we have such for obvious reasons, so many problems. You can see why staff is putting more money into their pension. We're putting, more than double into the pensions. We've got a death, okay, I'm done. I'm just frustrated. My apologies.
And I'm putting in a plug for the LCAP, that we need parents and staff and teachers to be involved, because clearly looking ahead, I mean, this isn't gonna change in the next couple of years. We're gonna be getting less money, and we're gonna have to continue to be held to high standards and educate children, so we need input. Like, what programs are working, what aren't working, and so I appreciate everyone who sits on that committee and comes once a month, and Cliff and Kim do an incredible job, but we need parents and people to get involved.
We had 18 parents for our last meeting.
Oh,
so
that was great.
we're
That's
making
great.
That was
headway.
really good.
Yes.
My last comment is, can you email that slideshow to the board?
We could try to post it online as well.
Okay.
Post on the website.
That'd be great.
We can put it
Yeah,
to
it
music,
just seems
so
to me that
parents-
something's gotta give. I
So
mean,
it's gonna
either-
give.
I mean, either the
It's not well
state
for
needs
us.
to pitch in more towards funding the pension liabilities, or there's gotta be something where there's more equality in the LCFF funding.
Yeah, and this is, I'll also send out a copy of this pocket, there's a pocket budget guide, and we can make copies. I'll have,
Oh, I'd love to have one of those.
yeah, I'll have Lori scan it over to Sue, and then if you want a paper copy, you can let us know. We'll be handing this out at the Budget Advisory Committee
I
as
want
well.
paper copy, please. When's the next budget meeting?
I think it's Thursday,
This Thursday, at what time?
3:30. So, the last slide is just questions, which we already kind of went through.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any
Thank
other
you,
questions
Chris.
for Chris?
Thanks, Chris.
They Scrabble family.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll remember that. Thank you very much. All right, I'm gonna take a deep breath. And we will move on, I'm sorry, I skipped one. We will move on to item 9, comments from the public. I have a few speaker cards here. We'll group them by topic. Oh, let me read.
You can have permission.
You breathe, it's hot in here, just me.
Just trim the
I'm gonna read the rules about speaking in front of the Board of Education. Under Government Code Section 54954.3A, members of the public have the right to address the governing board on any item or items of interest, providing it relates to the subject matter jurisdiction of the school district. In accordance with Board Policy BP 9323, each speaker is allocated a total of 4 minutes to address the board for a maximum of 20 minutes on each subject matter. While the above referenced government code allows speakers to criticize the district's policies, procedures, programs, services, and/or employees, the district does have a current policy, BPAR 1312.1, specific to complaints against employees. Should comments in the public pertain to a specific district employee, the board requests that the complaint first be submitted in writing to the employee's immediate supervisor for investigation. The board does not take action or discuss items not appearing on the agenda. The board values public comments and wishes to convey that although board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda, they listen carefully and appreciate and value input from the public. So a couple of decorum rules. Looking at the cards, I don't think this will be a problem. But we don't applaud or cheer someone else's comment, because you never know if someone else is sitting in the audience and has an opposing view, which may then be intimidated and not want to come up and speak. It can be nerve-wracking to come up and speak publicly. So we don't allow booing, cheering, any of the likes. He does get out of hand once in a while, but I try to keep lynching and under control. Also, we can ask clarifying questions. For example, you're telling us about an incident that happened at a sporting event. We may say, and ma'am, what date was that? What school was that? But we cannot, by law, engage with you in that topic because the rest of the community wasn't noticed that we would in fact be discussing that. So sometimes it can be frustrating when you come up and pour your heart out and we say, well, gee, thanks. And you have to turn around and walk away. But we promise we take notes, we direct people to get back, we will get back. We are listening. We do value the fact that you would take your time out to sit through depressing issues and come speak. So with no further ado, some definitely not rookies here in front of the board. Heather and Kathleen, why don't you come on up? Sue's got a timer, but I think you guys.
Oh, we've got this one.
Yeah, know the spiel.
This is a quick one. Good evening, all board members. I put my glasses on for the first time. I'm getting to that age.
I'm there with you.
So on behalf of Petaluma Parents Against Drugs and some lovely friends who've joined us, Wendy and Matt Thomas and Pam Granger, Petaluma Coalition. Petaluma Parents Against Drugs and Petaluma in Action have been working with many community members and agencies on actions and activities to curtail or prevent youth substance abuse. One of the priority activities that this group has identified as a major action item is parent education, which would include student age appropriate topics. We are aware of the challenges of making any type of parent-student education a requirement. However, tonight we are asking if the board to consider adopting a policy language that mandates at least one parent-student education event, either after school or in the evening, for each of the following grade levels, 6th, 8th, and 10th. At this time, it's clear that it would take staff time to research this concern and investigate the legality of such a policy. Petaluma in Action, PPAD, and the Petaluma Coalition to Prevent Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drug Problems respectfully request that the board direct staff to investigate this issue. We have already begun preliminary research and outreach in support of our request. And to be clear, after what we just listened to, we are not asking for any funding. I promise you. Merely an approval or policy approval to mandate the language of the meeting. That's all we got tonight. Thanks for the consideration.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you for all your work on that. It's a very important issue.
Thank you all.
And one of the things we can do is direct staff. Hi.
Hello.
Mr. Rose. Maybe you could do some investigation on that issue and get back to the board.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so the next three look like they're similar topics. How about Jennifer Stoneman? Come on up. Come on down. I will also say that when we start the timer, we don't have the flashy fun lights that City Council has, so I apologize if I have to interrupt you, maybe a little wave that you're getting within a minute or 30 seconds of your 4 minutes. Maybe you could wave at me 4 minutes. You could wave at me and I'll give a little. It always feels so rude to interrupt someone when they're speaking passionately. Take it away, ma'am.
I just want to acknowledge that we,
Picked a bad night.
well, we do acknowledge that the budget does not come from you guys, it comes from higher up, but this is still an important topic for us. My name is Jennifer Stoneman, and I have two boys at Mary Collins, Cherry Valley. One's a third grader and one's a kindergartner. I'm here before you to represent parents at Cherry Valley, many of whom are back in the room. We're concerned that the student-to-teacher ratio for the 2017-2018 school year has become compromised with the allowance of 28 max students in each classroom for kindergarten through third grade. This action has had an adverse effect on the quality of education that Cherry Valley students are receiving. We strongly disagree with this decision and urge you to reconsider your position for next year's enrollment. Back in August, I wrote a letter to Superintendent Gary Callahan and those on the board regarding the current class sizes, signed by 86 other parents at our school. I've had many conversations with our principal, and we've had multiple meetings with the district. As I understand it, PCS teacher's contract has a 24-to-1 staffing ratio which dictates how many teachers you need to hire based on children enrolled. I also understand the maximum number of students in each class of K through 3 cannot exceed 28. I also understand that the grade span adjustment provides money to the school district in order to keep the class sizes lower, and that charter schools like Cherry Valley are exempt to receive that money. For the 2017-2018 current school year, the average class size at Mary Collins in grades K through 3 was 25.3, which exceeds the 24.1 average size and is higher than any other primary school in the PCS district. The grade span adjustment states that charter schools do not need to progress towards or maintain a 24-to-1 ratio, but that doesn't mean that the charter school cannot be at 24-to-1. Just because you can enroll up to 28 students in K through 3rd at a charter school doesn't mean you should. Higher student-teacher ratios not only negatively impact the teacher's ability to instruct effectively and offer individualized attention and support to their students, they also create additional challenges to adequately supervise the students and keep them safe. Along with the arts and environmental focus in education and the project-based learning, for many families, the lower class sizes were a big draw to Cherry Valley. Many parents, such as myself, volunteer in their children's classrooms, some multiple days, and some for several hours. While this is helpful, it is only a short-term solution and it's not sustainable. With larger class size and no classroom aid, the student's learning environment is impacted. I'm here tonight to ask to become the solution so that our K through 3rd grade classes are not enrolled at 28 students per class for next year. We're willing to work with the board to develop a different course that puts students first without asking teachers to do more with less. If budget cuts are ever necessary, they should occur as far from the classroom as possible. Please consider all other cost-saving measures before taking this approach. As a charter, if we aren't getting money to ensure smaller class sizes through the grade span adjustment, then on behalf of the parents in Cherry Valley, I ask that you look at your budget and reallocate money to keep our class sizes at an average of 24-to-1 students to teachers. Not allowing our students the same rights to smaller class size because they are at a charter school does not make sense, and our children should not suffer because of it. I appreciate your time and hope you will consider reallocating of funds or another solution to not enroll up to 28 kids per class in K through 3 next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan, come on down.
We have excellent timing, obviously. This is very important. My name is Megan Malone, and I've been a Cherry Valley parent for the last 5 years. For 4 of those years, I've been very fortunate to have one of my children in the same K1 classroom, so that's a little confusing. 2 children, same classroom. It's been a joy to have my children's introduction to public education led by a dynamic, talented, and caring teacher. As adept, creative, and competent as this teacher is, something has changed in her classroom this year. I've been a very involved volunteer in the classroom since 2013, and I have never seen anything like this. Activities sometimes take almost twice as long as they have historically, because the teacher and the parent volunteers are having to constantly redirect and refocus students. It can be a struggle just to get through morning circle time without having to remind the class about the basic rules laid out on the first day of class in July. The difference is that this year, the class is significantly larger. When my oldest child started in this classroom in 2013, there were 20 students in her class. Her second year, there were 21. Last year, my younger daughter was in a class of 22. and this year there are 25 students. The difference between a class of 21 and a class of 25 may sound negligible, but if you've ever spent much time with 5 and 6-year-olds, you know that an extra 4 children can have the effect of a small army. The extra bodies in the classroom mean extra buzzing energy on rainy days, extra opportunities for distraction, and extra special needs of various kinds that are only beginning to surface in kindergarten and first grade. Perhaps most distressing is that as the teacher is juggling all of this extra, there are extra chances for the quiet kids, the ones who don't announce their struggles boldly, to fall under the radar and then fall behind. I cannot even fathom what the class will be like with 3 more children demanding and deserving time, attention, and individualized instruction. While Cherry Valley is exempt from the GSA rules as a charter school, it is my understanding that there is no mandate that we must enroll 28 students per class in grades K through 3. I've witnessed firsthand the negative effect that a larger class size can have on a day-to-day basis. Cherry Valley is one of the PCS schools that attracts a large number of families from outside of our district. Our innovative program deeply depends on reasonable class sizes. Please do what is right for these children and help to keep class sizes manageable. Their educations are at stake.
Thank you. Last but not least, Heather, did she leave? Oh, there she is.
Hello. My name is Heather Gallagher, and somebody left their glasses. Anyone?
Uh-oh. Oh, it's Heather.
All right.
No, she took her.
She took
Could
it?
that be her?
Yeah.
Oh, Libby's.
Libby's?
Here, I'll take
Libby
some.
Fitzgerald.
Okay. No, she put this one here. Oh, for the picture.
Yeah.
We'll restart your time, Heather.
Oh, I won't need it. Actually, these ladies said most of what I would like to say as well. My daughter, personally, in the last 2 years, she's at Cherry Valley as well. She's in 3rd grade, and for the last 2 years, I've been working with her in 2nd and 3rd grade with the change in the class size and working more at home with her on things that she's missing in class, because she has expressed to me that since there is such a large body of students in her class, that assignments that she has during class, she's not able to ask questions and get the answers she needs because the teacher is so spread out amongst the class answering other questions that students are having about the assignments, and she's academically regressing opposed to when she first started school. She was excelling, and I've seen a regression in 2nd grade, and so I made a huge point in 2nd grade to be more involved and ask questions with the teacher. The email change between me and the teacher, and learning about what's going in the class and discussions after class, just to be on board and act as a teacher myself at home is getting challenging, especially I'm a mother of 2, an infant has a lot of my attention. I do make a point of being there for my daughter, but I do notice that there's a lot of other students in the class that are just kind of goofing around and playing around because they don't have the teacher's attention at that moment, and they feel like they can be more socially active instead of doing the assignment because they don't really know what to do. And so what they do know what to do is to be social and enjoy their time with students that also don't know what's going on in the classroom because they're struggling. And I've seen it, and I wish that I could be in that classroom and be a teacher's aide, help out with these students and help answer questions, but I can't right now. And not every parent can, and we do need student aides. I had student aides when I was a kid, and it gave me such great educational success. And especially K through 3, I mean, that's our foundation of education. That gets us started for all the other crazy stuff that happens next, and with larger class sizes and not enough students getting the attention they need, they can fall behind and say education wasn't for them and go work, or maybe not work and do something else that we definitely don't want them to do. So please take into consideration our students right now. Thank you.
I think last time you were here, you were a mom of 1.5. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There's never anything wrong with advocating for your children, and the fact that you came out here tonight and waited for a very long meeting, we deeply appreciate that you care so much and that you are helping so much. So thank you.
Can I ask the girl one question?
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know.
I will cut you off if you can't.
Probably ask to Gary, it was brought up by several speakers that the charter exemption, do we staff all of our K through 3? Do we take the charter into effect when we're staffing K through 3?
When we staff initially, we staff all the schools the same. We start with that initial number. We do have bubbles that run through the schools. At every school we have it. For example, at Grant last year and at McNear, we had classes, grade spans of 27, 28 in both of the school sites.
So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the charter or not a charter?
Not that. We do have a bubble.
Got it.
We have lost, because of declining enrollment, we lost a teacher at Cherry Valley.
Right,
That severely affected our ratio.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Thank you, folks. You will stay as long as you'd like. We will not fault you if you need to leave. Item number 10, report on activities and correspondence with school board members. We attended a Valley Vista IB meeting, subcommittee of the Superintendent Leadership's Council, attendance at varsity basketball games, and I'm not sure when the last LCAP or budget was, if you just go to those. If it was within, I don't think there was anything between last meeting, right? Okay. All right, if nothing else, then we'll move on with the regular meeting. Item 11, approval of consent agenda by consolidated motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That takes us down to item 12, action items. 12.1, Administration and Human Resources. 12.11, Resolution 1718-12 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary and Joint Union High School Districts designating an alternative holiday in lieu of a regular holiday in the 2018-2019 school year.
Second.
Any discussion? Everyone see? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 12.1.2, Resolution 1718-13 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary and Joint Union High School Districts designating an alternative holiday in lieu of a regular holiday in the 2019-2020 year.
Second.
Say your a second. I like getting 2 years out here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 12.1.3, student attendance calendars for the 2018-2019 and the 2019-2020.
So moved.
Second.
I think it's the first time we've done two. Is that the first time? The first time we've had two?
Pretty exciting.
Everyone can plan their vacations. Look at that. Okay, any questions?
I have a question. Are parents, I know I've asked this before, are parents allowed on those committees?
So in the PFT contract, there is a description of who is on that committee, and it does not specify parents. However, as long as I've been on the committee, which is a number of years, we've always had a teacher who is also a parent.
Okay.
So I feel like that perspective
Right.
is represented, because that teacher doesn't leave her parent hat at the door when she walks in. But specifically in the contract, it does describe who's on the committee.
So it would have to be negotiated if you wanted to add parents to that.
Correct.
Is that ever anything that's been brought up, or how do you go about requesting that? Or?
Well, it would have to be part of our sunshine letter negotiations. Public Hearing District would propose that if we thought it was necessary.
Okay. All in
Thank
favor?
you.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 12.1.4, amended certificated employees auxiliary salary schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Comments, questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 12.1.5, approval to support legislation to increase the local control funding formula.
So move.
Second.
And look, I made all my budget notes on the back of it. To make sure I know where they all are. Gary, I would like if you run this, share this information.
It's a good letter.
So there is a Assemblyman out of Torrance, Al Marisucci, who was a former board member who recognizes that we're not fully funded. And is it going to make a nice college try to get an assembly bill passed that would increase the base funding for all school districts? Because that, essentially that 2007, 2008 is not going to cut it. And so what we have done is drafted a letter that we'd like the board to approve in concept. I can add that we anticipate, in the letter, it says that we anticipate to continue to deficit spend probably somewhere in the neighborhood between $500,000 and $1 million. We've been working with my advisory council, who has taken on leadership for helping to stir the pot and let people know what's going on and get a similar letter out that they can use to send to their local assembly people, which in our case would be Mark Levine, Region 10. Mark, if you're listening, you want to look for that. But also Region 4, Aguiar Curry, Assembly Person, and Region 2, the Santa Rosa region, I think it's Kelly. But we really need to act on this as a group, and we need to mobilize and let people know that we can no longer play the budget victim anymore. We've got to act on this stuff and let people know that we're concerned about this. And so I am sending the draft letter as well as the draft copies that we're putting together for parents to the other superintendents in Sonoma County. We're in contact with they call themselves the California School Funding Coalition, which is school services led as well, so that we are in touch with what's going on with this particular bill. And we're holding true to our word, which was we talked about 5 months ago, that we were going to do something about this when it came along. He is making it happen. What he is proposing is exactly the issue. He clearly understands it. And Sandra and I were there when he spoke in Sacramento. And so we're asking the board to approve the letter in draft. We'll finish it, get it signed off, and away we go.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Good for you.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, no, it's nicely written.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Big cloud. 12.2, business services. 12.2.1, purchase orders.
Second.
Questions, comments, issues? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 12.2.2, ratification of warrant register for warrants issued December 1st of 2017 through December 31st, 2017 by Petaluma City Schools.
So moved.
I have to recuse
We have any?
myself.
Second.
So this is the one we had to move the two of you, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so Phoebe and Mike are out on this one. Okay, so those two, they abstain, and the three of us, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 12.2.3, resolution, did I skip one? No. 12.2.3, resolution 1718-14, the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary School District certification of unhoused pupils as related to charter school applications for facilities funding.
So moved. Second.
Questions, comments,
Well, I just noticed
explanation?
it.
Great question. So our Live Oak Independent Charter has applied to the Office of Public School Construction. They've submitted their application for new construction eligibility or funding. As a piece of that, we had to go through and fill out some, or submit our eligibility for base funding under the new construction to determine eligibility and what number of unhoused students there may or may not be. So based on our determination, there are 0 unhoused students. This is really a formality that we need the board to go through, look at this resolution. It doesn't really mean anything for Petaluma City Schools, it really is on behalf or in support of the Live Oak Charter. And we're obligated to do it. So we've worked with school facilities consultants to kind of assist us in this process and advise us, because we're actually only submitting our draft eligibility because we don't necessarily feel like at this time we want to set our base eligibility. The high school set, and this is only the elementary district because it's Live Oak is authorized by the elementary. So really, again, we don't really have much eligibility under new construction for the elementary because we're not in growth mode in our elementary district. But this resolution basically just says we've done the work and we're certifying that there's no unhoused students. So in other words, if we were in an extremely growing district, we might say, we have X number of students that we can't house, we're putting in portables, we're, you know what I mean, we're not in that mode.
So are they asking to do new construction, Live Oak is, at some point?
They're applying for funding. So they're applying for funding in order to see what their eligibility is. So they have to apply, get their determination for their eligibility under new construction, and then get in line for if there's any money. So assuming there's eligibility, then they have to kind of get in line to say, is there any money available to fund projects that are out there?
So it's nothing that would hit our general fund?
No, no. But remember, they have 1.8 million of our bond money set aside for them, and so what they're looking at is, look, we want to take the 1.8, get some state funding to put with it to come up with a long-term facility solution for Live Oak Charter. That's really what this is. But it has no impact on Petaluma City Schools. But as the authorizing entity, we're obligated to go through the process to determine our eligibility, because our eligibility kind of relates to their eligibility.
Are they looking for private funding or through the state?
Through the state. This is all OPS, Office of Public School Construction, under the various, there's modernization money, so there's a bucket of modernization under Prop 55 and the various propositions before it, and there's new construction eligibility. And then there's some other types of programs as well, but those are the two main ones.
So the fact that we're saying there's no unhoused students probably doesn't help their application?
It really doesn't help, it doesn't hurt, it's just really us going through our process so that allows them to go through their process.
Got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 12.3, educational services, 12.3.1, second reading and adoption of Study Sync for grades 6 through 8, ELA, ELD.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? It was a great presentation.
So are we approving, we're adopting Study Sync, or what's the Study Sync, or 6 through 8 if this passes tonight?
Correct, then we'll bring back the actual cost and purchase and have to do all that later, but
Got it.
yeah, this is to go ahead and move forward with these two curriculums, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 12.3.2, second reading and adoption of Wonders for grades TK through 5, ELA, ELD.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Another great part of the presentation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, you weren't here. Were you here? You were not here when we went over the new,
No, but I did some research.
but do we still have them out there? If you get 5 minutes tonight or some other time, we have them all. They're beautiful books. So you should, we have them out in the lobby and you can take a look at them.
Okay, cool.
It was a great presentation too. Bring us down to 13, discussion, informational items. 13.1, administration human resources. 13.1.1, first reading of board bylaw. 9400, board self-evaluation. Anybody got any questions on that?
It's just a CSBA update.
We already have a policy, but CSBA changed a few words here and there. 13.2, educational services. 13.2.1, first reading, precision machining technology, second edition, PHS textbook adoption. Anybody have any questions about that? Or comments or anything? All
You wanna
right.
see it?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
You just
It's a two-hander.
pass it around.
Wow.
How much?
That leaves us at,
Yes, how much?
one item of future business, and then I'll discuss closed session. Well, Gary, do you have any future business? And now he's panicking because I said discuss closed session, not discussion, but. Well, I just wanted to mention that in relationship to that letter, where did I write this down? That you and I don't know if anyone else is going, and I don't know if they still have room, but it went out in our emails, our board emails to the superintendents and all the boards, I believe, to all board members, wasn't it? Gary?
Yes.
Yes. To have a nice roundtable discussion on education with Mark Levine at Fitsko, I think, on February 8th. Fitsko?
Yeah, I think it's him and it's
And Bill Dodd, I think, is
Jared,
gonna
I think
come.
it's Huffman's there too, maybe?
Huffman. So,
Although federal is, for us, is
Is it,
it's the state.
Can
It's-
ask Sue to call and see if they have room. It was limited seating.
I'd love to go.
Will you check?
Just let me know.
So, perfect timing for that.
Call the question.
Yeah. Okay, so lastly, we are going to return to closed session, but I will say we do not have anything to report out on 3.1 or 3.2. We started 3.3, and I don't believe we'll have anything to report out on that. So with that, I won't call us adjourned yet, but we are going to reconvene back into closed session. So thank you all for coming. And Sue, can I give you these glasses?